Hey everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the relationship of Russia to Iran and what Russia has been doing to help Iran and how Russia just became maybe part of the war yesterday in an indirect way. Let me explain. There was an airstrike that took place that the Americans carried out that was very different than the other airstrikes they've been carrying out since this recent escalation began. Take a look at this headline. U.S. strikes strategic Iran-China-Russia rail corridor bridge. And this has been reported everywhere. I'm using Iranian state media for this. The United States launched a cruise missile strike early Thursday targeting the Aktape-Khan railway bridge in Akala County, Golestan province, a strategic link on the China-Turkmenistan-Iran rail corridor used for trade between China, Russia, and Iran. So America struck this critical bridge. Let's read the article and then we'll look at a map and we'll talk about it. The bridge is located on the international China-Kazakhstan-Turkmenistan-Inche-Borun railway route, which enters Iran through its northeastern border and connects Gorgan to Tehran. The route forms part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, extending from Jian to Tehran. According to the report, at least 65 freight trains traveled from China to Iran via the corridor last year. Following the maritime blockade of Iranian ports, foreign media reported that rail traffic on the route tripled. Let me read that sentence again, folks. Following the maritime blockade of Iranian ports, foreign media reported that rail traffic on the route tripled. The blockade on Iranian ports led to more overland shipping from China into Iran. It tripled on this rail route. The report also states that Russia began transporting goods to Iran through the same railway corridor in November 2025. Let me remind you, that's just this past November. It's after the 12-day war. It's right around the time that the Iranian people were starting to take to the streets, leading analysts to describe the strike as more than a conventional military attack. The attack marks one of the deepest U.S. strikes inside Iranian territory since the start of the conflict. Since the ceasefire, U.S. operations had primarily focused on military targets in southern Iran near the Strait of Hormuz, making the targeting of infrastructure near the Turkmenistan border a notable shift. Iran has previously repaired damaged rail infrastructure in a short period during attacks on April 7th, 2026. That's the day before the initial ceasefire. 6 railway bridges in Tehran, Alborz, Qom, Isfahan, Zanjan, and East Azerbaijan were targeted. Iranian engineers restored all 6 bridges and resumed railway operations in less than 96 hours. According to the latest announcement by the head of Iran's railway company, engineers restored one of the damaged railway lines near Mashhad in less than 13 hours after the latest U.S. attack, and train services have resumed. Okay, that's part of their bluster, saying that everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine. Let's first of all go back to April 7th and what happened there. That was in the final weeks and days of the 40 days of attacks from February 28th until the war was stopped on April 8th. In those final days, especially the Israelis had turned their attention to starting to strike civilian infrastructure because the Israelis were moving more towards degrading the regime, moving more towards what would bring down the regime. So you see that a whole bunch of the infrastructure, the railways, started to be targeted. Let's talk about this railway in particular. So in this article, it includes a little map of the Russia piece of the railway. So here's a little graphic here, and you see that here's Russia, and here's Iran down here, and Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, and the railway runs around this way and comes down, and it hooks up somewhere around here with the railway that goes out to Iran, right? So let me pull up a different map. So if you see on a map here, here's Iran, here's Turkmenistan. This little red spot here, this is where the attacks took place yesterday, right on the Turkmenistan border. Now, what is so significant about this, and they're pointing to in the article, is that the Strait of Hormuz is down here. This is Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is in the southern part of Iran, all the way in the bottom, southeastern Iran, and all of the American attacks that we've seen over the last couple months since the ceasefire, with all the skirmishes in the Strait of Hormuz, including this current escalation, they've all been down in here. Okay, they've been in Bandar Abbas, they've been in Sirik, in Bandar al-Jask, all of these places along here. This is what they have been attacking. And this is a totally different part of the country, all the way in the northeastern border up here. And you have, Mashhad is out here. This is the area that they now, Golistan province, that's the northernmost province on the eastern side of Iran. That's where this strike took place. Okay, so this is from IntelliNews. U.S. strike on Iranian railway bridge hits China-Russia trade corridor near Turkmenistan. The U.S. struck the Aktakakan railway bridge with cruise missiles, hitting a link on the rail corridor connecting Iran to China and Russia. The strike marks one of the deepest U.S. attacks inside Iranian territory, extending the target list beyond military sites in the south to trade infrastructure that Tehran has leaned on to circumvent and sustain overland links with Beijing and Moscow. To circumvent sanctions and the blockade. So this is different. Okay, the bridge, let's learn a little bit more about it. It sits on the China, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Inche-Barun corridor, which enters Iran from the northeast and connects Gorgan to Tehran, according to the report. The route forms part of China's Belt and Road Initiative running from Xi'an to Tehran. At least 65 trains have traveled from China to Iran over the past year. This is all what we saw reported already. The attack comes at a time when U.S. strikes since the ceasefire had focused on military targets in southern Iran near the Strait of Hormuz. So this is A, not a military target, and B, it's nowhere near the Strait of Hormuz. Targeting a bridge near the Turkmenistan border represented one of the deepest U.S. strikes into Iranian territory. Iranian rail infrastructure has been struck before. It mentions the April 7th attacks, etc. Okay. Now, let's learn a little bit more. There's something called the Five Nations Railway Corridor that this is a part of, and it connects Iran in the west through Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and China. Okay, so let's look on a map. Here's Iran. So see Iran, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. Here's China. Okay, so this railway, the entry point into Iran, is what was attacked yesterday. And it made a point in all the articles to mention that it's also used by the Russians, because the way the Russians hook up with the Belt and Road is to come down this way and hook up with it here. Okay, they don't go down through Iran. The Russians don't want to be hooking up to the Belt and Road through Iran. If they came down through Azerbaijan and hooked up through Iran, then they'd be depending on Iran for their connection to the Belt and Road. So Russia connects with the Belt and Road this way. Okay, it comes down this way. Right, you can see this. There's a map they included here. You see the way the Russians come down into Iran. You know, it's obviously much more direct for the Russians to come down this way, but they don't, because if that was their railway, then their connection to the Belt and Road would run through Iran. Here's another graphic that they included here. Sorry. Okay, so now we understand that why that Russia and China have been connected to Iran this way. But what have they been doing with this connection? So there's been a lot of reports and rumors that the Russians have been helping the Iranians rebuild their air defenses and rebuild other infrastructure. And it rings true, even if not everything's been reported, because of a few stories I'm going to show you. Take a look at this one. And these are all very recent. June 17th, so a few weeks ago, less than a month ago, Iran signs agreement to purchase 20 helicopters from Russia. That means that in the middle, this is the day the MOU was signed between the U.S. and Iran. In the middle of all these negotiations, this is what the Iranians are planning to do with their money. We talk about giving sanctions relief or unfreezing Iranian assets. On June 17th, last month, they're signing an agreement to purchase 20 helicopters from Russia. The Iranian Red Crescent Society and the Russian Helicopters JSC have officially signed a memorandum of understanding for the procurement of 20 helicopters for the Islamic Republic of Iran. it was described as an unprecedented milestone in the history of the Iranian Red Crescent Society. First 4 helicopters. Okay. The helicopters are equipped with modern technology, night vision systems, enabling night flight operations. They're outfitted for firefighting operations and providing medical and emergency rescue services. Yeah. They have no military use. They're just for medical purposes. Here's Russia selling helicopters to Iran. And we have this from 2 days later. Russian experts to return soon to Bushehr nuclear power plant project. Iran's deputy minister of energy has announced that Tehran and Moscow have reached an agreement for the prompt return of Russian nuclear specialists to Iran, where they will resume work on the construction of units 2 and 3 of the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Okay, so the Russians have been itching to get back in to continue building or rebuilding the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Russian Ministry of Energy has expressed readiness to assist in the reconstruction of Iran's energy facilities that were damaged in recent attacks. Russian envoy, this is from June 28th, just the end of June, less than 2 weeks ago. Moscow ready to help rebuild Iran's war-damaged infrastructure. Russia is prepared to assist Iran in rebuilding infrastructure damaged during the U.S. and Israeli attacks, Ambassador to Tehran Alexei Dedov said. Dedov said Russian industrial and construction firms, engineering and design institutes, and scientific and technology centers possess the expertise needed for reconstruction. Upon receiving an official request from Tehran, Moscow was ready to promptly assess reconstruction needs, etc., etc. Iran and Russia signed a $25 billion agreement in September 2025 to build the 4-unit, 5,000-megawatt Hormuz nuclear power plant, which is planned near the cities of Minab and Sirik in Hormozgan province, right on the Strait of Hormuz. And so we see that the Russians are very much engaged and involved and invested in rebuilding Iran's infrastructure and selling them equipment. They had this train route. And by the way, the train route from Russia into Iran that I showed you only began operating in early November, late October, early November of 2025. Okay, it's actually brand new, meaning that it was really inaugurated, kind of put into use after the 12-day war. They built this overland route, and it's been in heavy use ever since the Americans put a blockade on Iran. So both the Iranians and the Chinese have been shipping a lot of material into Iran. Like I said, there are very strong rumors that this has included weapons components. They tend to ship a lot of these things in pieces, and then they get assembled on the other side. And so here, this gives us a different perspective on what the Americans did by striking this bridge, this critical point on this railway line, where both from the Chinese side coming from the east and from the Russian side coming down from the north, that's where this railway, it meets up and it enters into Iran. That's where the Americans struck to cut off this shipping route. And that may signal to us that the U.S. is not just hitting civilian infrastructure, but really looking to put the blockade back on and this time make it more serious. Maybe that's what it's signaling here, because the overland routes, both this rail route and the overland routes from Pakistan into Iran, significantly undermined the blockade. Even though Trump always talked about how hermetic the blockade was, it was from the standpoint of ships coming into ports. That's true. But the overland shipping routes, as we saw, they accelerated the use of them. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic front, there was a resolution that was proposed by the United Arab Emirates and others to basically, it was a declaration. A UAE and Singapore sponsored resolution on the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz was presented at the United Nations Maritime Body on Wednesday, 2 days ago. Delegates at the International Maritime Organization said the resolution sent an important signal about the open rules of global economy and safety. The sponsors call for protection of vital shipping lanes, including upholding and respecting navigational rights and freedoms for commercial ships when transiting through the Straits of Hormuz or for straits using international navigation. The UN body's leader condemned the resumption of attacks in the strait as a dangerous escalation. I condemn the attacks over the past 2 days against several ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, said the International Maritime Organization Secretary General. And so that's what this resolution was. And then many countries started signing up for it. And it got rejected by China and Russia. China and Russia rejected what they described as an anti-Iran narrative contained in the document proposed by the United Arab Emirates during a meeting of the Council of the International Maritime Organization. According to the Chinese and Russian delegations, the document presented at the IMO Council is one-sided and places blame on Iran. Russia's representative was said that the UAE's document is deeply politically biased, places full responsibility for the crisis solely on Iran, and ignores its underlying causes. So that's what I wanted to share with you in this video, that the Russians are very actively helping the Iranians, the Russians and Chinese as well, but the Russians are very actively helping the Iranians. They've been helping them with their nuclear energy infrastructure. They've been helping them by shipping in all kinds of equipment, by selling them equipment. There's also been indications that the Iranians are in the process of purchasing airplanes from Russia these days. There's a lot to be concerned with about the China-Russia relationship. In fact, maybe I should pull that up here. Here, let's pull that up. There's a news item about Iran purchasing aircraft from Russia recently. Here we go. Look at this. Russia to slow Su fighter deliveries to its Air Force as industry focuses on arming Iran. This is from July 9th, yesterday. The Russian aerospace forces are projected to receive Su-35 fighter aircraft at a significantly lower rate in 2026 and 2027, as the production capacity at the plant is focused on meeting large export orders from Iran. The factory was reported in early July to have completed production of 20 of the fighters for the Iranian Air Force, with 28 additional fighters having been ordered to provide Iran with a total fleet of 48 Su-35s. The Su-35 is a very advanced aircraft. Let's see what it says down here. I think it talks about them. Here it is. The Su-35 is the most advanced Russian aircraft, basically. It also talks about how they purchased other aircraft, other lesser aircraft. The Iranian Defense Ministry ordered 12 Su-30 fighter aircraft, a less complex derivative of the same type of aircraft. Basically, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo. I'm going to wrap this up here. The Russians have been selling aircraft. Whether it's fighter jets, whether it's helicopters, they've been shipping things into Iran. They've been sending in their men to help rebuild the nuclear facilities, to help rebuild infrastructure. They're committed to helping Iran in a whole host of ways. And this attack by the Americans, I'm not saying it was sending a signal to the Russians. The United States doesn't have to send them signals, but it was trying to cut off that overland shipping route. What it signals to me is that the American attacks now are not only about cutting off the Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz, because all the other attacks we saw were all around the Strait of Hormuz, and this signals something different. Let's see if it's a sign of some things to come, or if it's an isolated incident. Either way, it is certainly worth noting. All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching.